Just about everyone who plays in the NBA today grew up watching the NBA on TV. That means every player has a role model or an idol who they look up to. Sometimes, they even imitate other players or copy their moves entirely. Here's a compilation of some of the most obvious cases of players impersonating other players. James Harden's step back. James Harden's step back is one of the most effective moves in basketball history. It's also one of the most distinctive, and one of the most controversial too. To this day, nobody can agree on whether it's a travel or not. In fact, it seems like even the referees sometimes can't agree. The move relies on what is known as a gathering step. Harden has to grab the ball with both hands at the same time as he takes his first leap backward. This makes the move similar to a backwards jump stop. However, he can't pick up the ball too soon, otherwise he'll get called for traveling, or at least, in theory, he should. Despite being an extremely divisive move, numerous NBA stars have learned to imitate it. What's funny is, not all of them can do it the way Harden does. LeBron James isn't especially known for his three-point shooting, but he has copied the Harden step back before. Take this example from a game against the Clippers. James executed the move fairly well, but he screwed up arguably the most important step. He didn't step back far enough. Harden has made it almost a routine to get fouled on three-pointers and then convert for a 4-point play. 2-point step backs aren't going to cut it. Another player to imitate Harden is Kyrie Irving. In fact, Irving had the balls to score on Harden himself using his own move against him. Luka Doncic, who's almost a decade younger than Harden, hasn't only copied his move, he's made it just as important a part of his game as it is for Harden. In just a couple years, Doncic has made nearly 500 three-pointers. He's also made some seriously clutch shots. Many, if not most, have been step-back threes that look extremely similar to James Harden. Doncic doesn't attempt nor make close to as many threes as Harden on average, but he does have the advantage of being bigger and taller. Despite having a strong rivalry, Steph Curry has also imitated Harden's move. The funny thing is, he's been called for traveling while doing it. This probably makes Steph nuts. He could probably swear to the ref that he made sure to copy Harden's move perfectly, but that might be embarrassing to admit. Harden will most likely always be the king of his own move for as long as he plays. However, that hasn't stopped him from getting imitated and even ridiculed by some of his fellow NBA players and even teammates. Just check out this former teammate of Harden imitating his move in practice. Westbrook and Harden famously beefed and eventually had to be separated to different teams. It's possible this lighthearted joke didn't go over well, but we'll never know for sure. Nick Young impersonates D'Angelo Russell. One of the most distinctive things NBA players do is what they do after finishing a great play. Some point to the sky for religious reasons, others have hand symbols or poses they make, but some players choose more obnoxious things. D'Angelo Russell is a prime example. For years, ever since Russell has made a clutch or game-winning shot, he has pointed to his upper forearm. He started repeating the same bragging phrase, "I got ice in my veins, I got ice in my veins." According to Russell, this is something he learned from his father. In an interview with GQ, he said that growing up, his father always told him you have to be prepared for big moments. You have to have no feelings. You have to have ice in your veins. This sounds a little scary, but it also doesn't make sense, because Russell is clearly full of feelings, namely the feeling that he's the coolest, most excellent person in the world. Russell told GQ that he's been doing the flex since he played in high school. Eventually, in 2016, someone came along who thought Russell's move was so cool, he wanted to do it himself. That person was Nick Young. Young joined the Lakers in 2013. This meant that both he and D'Angelo Russell became teammates after D'Angelo was drafted by the Lakers in 2015. In November of 2016, Nick Young hit an impressive clutch three-pointer to beat the Thunder at the Staples Center. In the heat of the moment, with the LA crowd roaring at him, Young decided to blatantly copy Russell's ice in the veins flex. Russell was obviously flattered. In that same interview with GQ, he talked about the moment, saying, "I feel like it's a new wave. It's always good to be a trendsetter." Luckily, for the rest of us, Russell was definitely exaggerating. Beyond Nick Young, nobody else has copied the move, and that's probably for the best. Trey Young impersonates LeBron. Another post-move shot that is even more famous than D'Angelo Russell's is the routine LeBron started doing in early 2013. LeBron calls it the silencer. It's actually a pretty long sequence. First, push down on the air like you're pumping up a bicycle tire. Then, you slap your chest like you have heartburn. Then, for the finale, you yell. Bicycle tires, heartburn, yelling for no reason? It sounds like LeBron is doing an impersonation of a middle-aged white guy. Nobody knows where he came up with this bizarre celebration or what any of the gestures actually mean, but that hasn't stopped other players from imitating the whole thing, from start to finish. Sometimes to a degree that's honestly kinda cringy. During the game between the Hawks and the 76ers, the score was tied with 3.5 seconds to go. It was a home game for Atlanta, and the ball was theirs to inbound. It was a perfect example of the moment every kid dreams about growing up. For Trey Young, that childhood dream was about to become a reality, but unfortunately, the child in him also made a surprise appearance. Trey almost seemed to forget anyone was watching. He was back in his backyard with that portable hoop and dusty ball. He may have even been making sound effects with his mouth and miming the roar of the crowd, even though there was a crowd actually there roaring. This clip is a little embarrassing, but in his defense, Young did make an incredible play. It's also a heartwarming reminder that the NBA stars we look up to are usually just as big of fans as we are. However, heartwarming definitely wouldn't describe this next clip. Schroder impersonates Damian Lillard. It's not always nice when players impersonate each other. Sometimes they do it to be competitive, to mess with their opponent, or just to be plain mean. All three of those descriptions could probably apply to Schroder after a gimmick he pulled on Damian Lillard. It was Game 3 in the first round of the NBA playoffs. The Blazers were up 2-0, but as it usually happens, Game 3 was a strong victory for Oklahoma City. Returning to their home court, the Thunder were up by 12 points with under 2 minutes left in regulation. Lillard, one of the best free throw shooters in the NBA, was sent to the line. It was at this critical moment that Schroder pulled out the taunt from hell. Lillard is famous for tapping his wrist after he makes a big shot. The message here is that it's Dame time, which really is just a lousy pun that means the game is his. In a rare moment, Lillard missed this crucial free throw to the roar of the Oklahoma City crowd. 18,000 people cheering when you make a mistake is bad enough, but Schroder took it a step further, imitating Lillard's own move and saying in his ear, "It's Dame time." That annoying and unnecessary taunt definitely pissed Lillard off, but it didn't stop him from making the next free throw. Portland ultimately won the series in 5 games. Dame time continued into the postseason, while summertime began for Schroder and the Thunder. LeBron impersonates Allen Iverson. In today's NBA, LeBron is the guy everybody else tries to impersonate, but LeBron is just like the rest. He grew up watching his idols play too. Apparently, one of those idols was Allen Iverson, because LeBron once recreated one of Iverson's most famous moments. Any basketball fan will have seen Iverson step over Tyronn Lue in Game 1 of the 2001 Finals. But amazingly, Tyronn Lue would get stepped over again by another all-time player. Atlanta is over 2,000 miles away from LA, but clearly, Lue didn't run far enough. He had to relive his nightmares on the floor of the arena all over again. Noel impersonates Chris Paul. Chris Paul has some of the best handles the league has ever seen, so it's no surprise other players want to imitate him. But it's pretty surprising to see what Noel decided to imitate. Instead of imitating one of Paul's crossovers or circus shots, Noel imitated a bizarre and unexplained event that happened at the free throw line. During Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, Chris Paul had the bad luck to be standing next to Dwight Howard during a free throw attempt. Dwight Howard is basically a foot taller than Paul. His massive build doesn't help either. We all know there's no way Paul was going to box him out, but even then, what Paul did raises some questions. One of the questions might have been, "What the hell are you doing?" Another question might be, "What's the matter with you?" This weird leapfrog move was instantly called as a foul. It made Chris Paul look silly, and it had no benefit whatsoever. But the real head scratcher is why anyone would want to recreate this embarrassing play. Leave it to Noel. Noel not only recreated the moment, he made it even sillier. This gave him an automatic VIP pass straight to the highlight reel for Shaq's in a Fool that week. Making the play even worse is the fact that Noel and Andre Drummond, who he jumped on, are roughly the same height. At least you can understand Chris Paul resorting to other tactics when he's so outside. What was Noel's excuse? Lucky for him, he never had to explain himself. Both he and Drummond seem to get a good laugh out of the whole thing. Steph Curry and Damian Lillard impersonate each other. Damian Lillard and Steph Curry have a bit of a rivalry. Both guards are similar in size, skills, and stats. Lillard has been open about the fact that he feels he's had to prove himself his whole life. Lillard and many of his fans think that he's just as good as Steph Curry, if not better. There are some stats to prove it too. Lillard scores more points overall, and from super deep 3 range, his percentage is way higher. All this means that Steph and Dame are constantly trying to outdo each other. There has been no better example of this than at this year's NBA All-Star game where they played together on Team LeBron. The end of the second half basically devoted into a half-court shootout. It was exciting to see how these two players feed off of each other. Once Lillard hit one, Steph knew he had to hit one right after. There were many other incredible moments in the All-Star game. Giannis was perfect from the field, scoring 35 points on 16 for 16 shooting. Zion got about 500,000 lobs. Both Curry and Chris Paul were on the dunking end of an alley-oop. But this shootout between Curry and Lillard was probably the highlight of the whole event. As the announcers repeatedly said, these two have transformed the game.
Not fair. Please, it's not fair. Really, it's not fair, C-Web. The game has changed.
To watch them push each other to even further heights is an inspiration to anyone who loves sports. It's also proof that, as funny as it sounds, imitating and impersonating one another is an important part of players pushing forward and making a unique impact. Everyone imitates Steph Curry and fails. Damian Lillard is far from the only player to impersonate Steph Curry. In fact, Impersonating Steph Curry has become so common on basketball courts around the world that many grumpy NBA analysts have accused Steph of ruining the game. This is a ridiculous thing to say, but there are cases where you can see what they mean. One Steph's signature is when he turns around before a three-pointer has even gone in. This looks really cool when the shot goes in, but it looks incredibly stupid when it doesn't. Leave it to players like Nick Young and Kemba Walker to do the latter. Nick Young's shot is just inexcusable. He knew it too. Once he realized what had happened, he was unhappy to say the least. For being really generous, you could at least defend Kemba and say that he got robbed hard. The ball was halfway down before he turned around and it bounced out in a way that very rarely happens. But either way, it's an embarrassing moment for both players. The move is just too hard to copy. Even Steph himself has messed it up in the past. He played it off pretty well, but everyone in the arena saw what happened. It also doesn't help that this biff immediately turned into a made three on the other end of the floor. Steph went from blowing the three in spectacular fashion to giving up an easy three for Kyrie Irving. I guess, weirdly enough, sometimes NBA players even fail to impersonate themselves.